Hi, it's Warren Whitlock with another Emerging Technologies podcast. We like to talk about emerging technologies. In fact, it's most everything I talk about. I like to look towards the future. I say I live in the future. I don't need to live in the past. That's already happened. I study that, I learn from it, but I don't want to live there. I don't want to go back. Nostalgia for olden days? Nah. What's happened, happened. We're here now. Do like the idea of living in the present. When you're living in the present, it means you know you're here. You know what's happening. Right now is the only moment you have because it's true. The end of this podcast is happening in the future. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what you're going to do. I got a pretty good idea. I got plans, but all I know about is right now. I'm paying 100% attention to you. If I really like to talk about what I plan for, it's got to be the future. The rest of my life is going to be in the future. Isn't that the same thing true for you? And it's a future that has exponential growth in these emerging technologies. Today, I'd like to talk about one that's been in the news here in the US recently about Microsoft buying the closed 3 Mile Island plant and what that means and why they're doing it, and just the need for energy and some of the ideas that are good and some of the misconceptions we have as we think about how we're going to have enough power for everyone on Earth to get everything they want. It's true. That's what we need to do. In the US, it's a popular thing to say that we've got to cut back and use less energy because if we moderate our lifestyles to use less energy, then we're going to need it. And we're going to try to get China to do the same thing. China, who has 3 times the population and energy use less than ours, or India, the same thing. And just the rest of the world in general, we use way per capita more energy than what would be our fair share if it was a limited finite amount. And that's the first thing we need to talk about energy. Energy is not finite. There is so much abundance of energy. It's ridiculous to conceive, to try to think that there'd be a way that we wouldn't have enough energy. Yeah, if you're on battery and the power runs out, you have zero energy, you're in trouble. If you have a power plant and it goes down and there's a problem, if you have a weather event and it shuts down power grids, there'd be some terrible things. We're not talking about running out of energy here. I'm here to tell you about how there's going to be more. Then don't worry when they tell you that we're going to need double or triple the amount of energy in 50 years. And oh no, woe is me. The coal and the oil are going to kill us all. First of all, I don't want to talk about climate change. I accept that the climate is changing. That's why it's called climate. If the weather was exactly the same every day, it wouldn't be climate. Of course, it's changing. I also fully accept that man doing things makes some difference in the climate. When I step back and take a larger look at the situation, Earth is a really big place. There's room for all of us and some more, probably topping out at a population of 10, 11 billion. If anything, we have to worry in some place whether there will be babies born to replace us, and a problem where our society, at least for the last century, has all been built on growth. That tends to be slowing down, whether we want it to or not. There's cases to be made each way. Maybe we would be better off if there were a couple billion less people. That's crazy. Bill Gates got in trouble for mentioning something like I just said, and then it's taken out of context and saying that he'd like to reduce the population. No. Mass murder, killing the population? No. That's ridiculous. We don't want to do that because the thing we have to worry about is the population may go down anyway. Because things like the one child policy in China for decades made it that there's a lot less people having children now, and their population is going to decline, perhaps as much as 50% over the next 50 to 100 years, because it'll just not have enough replacement. The new generation, if the birth rate stays the same, it'll just keep going down. There are places where the birth rate's going up. There are actually governments giving incentives for people to have children. I think that's probably a good program, but politics, this show doesn't talk about the policies like that. What we're here to say is there's things going on all over the world. We hear all of this news. What's underneath that? What's really happening? Well, actually, we have enough energy hitting the planet every day from the sun to take care of all of us forever. We also have enough energy inside of atoms that are all around us that can be extracted and used for more abundant energy than we know. Ultimately, there's fusion, which I'm not a believer saying fusion's going to be here any minute. I believe that we're getting there and it looks like it's going to be here at any minute. The trend says yes, but we're not depending on that one yet. Fission, nuclear fission, which has that bad word nuclear in it, is so abundant. It's just crazy abundant and crazy safe. And let me tell you about that. Nuclear started off as something they used to build bombs, so that sounds bad. And then they had some other ideas of what to do it. By the 1960s, we were building peacetime nuclear reactors to supply energy. Currently in the United States, it's about 20% of our energy. Some places in France, it's most of the energy. A lot of places that nuclear has worked really well. In the 1960s and the 1970s, plants were coming on. These are multi-billion-dollar projects. Takes years to plan, to get approval, to make safe, and then they come online, and then the upfront cost is sunk, it's gone, but the cost of running it gets to be a tiny fraction of that. It would make no sense cutting corners on the cost of running a nuclear plant once it's up and running. There are some considerations. The political, social move against nuclear energy has made it so that some of these plants were probably not as maintained as well as they could be. None that have fallen apart because of maintenance, but there was the design, there was Chernobyl, and the weather disaster, which was the Fukushima, I hope I'm saying that right, the Japan one. When it happened, we saw news in California that any day the wave of radiation would come across the Pacific and hit California. Good old California can find a crisis in anything. You know, if you get a hurricane in Florida, you're going to get it in the weather report in California as to how that's going to affect your sunny sky. That's how they talked about it. It was going to be so horrible. But let's go back to the big one, 3 Mile Island. Back in 1979, there was a very popular movie made that coincidentally, I can't believe there could have been any conspiracy going on, but who knows? It was just, I think, coincidentally, a movie called China Syndrome. And I mentioned that to a couple of younger people who weren't around in 1979, and they don't know what even China Syndrome means or the movie. I can't recommend the movie. It wasn't bad. This is the Jane Fonda and Jack Lemmon. It's quite popular. The idea was this plant was not following safety procedure, and Cher was in it, the singer. Somebody got the nuclear waste stuck in their car and it killed them. Yeah, which is a little bit outlandish. That could happen. There are safety procedures to keep those things happening, but who knows? Evil person with the right amount of clout maybe could. But that was the side story. The big story was what's called the China Syndrome. When I was a kid, we talked about it all the time. That if you went down through the crust of the earth, through all the molten lava and everything to the very hot core of the center of the earth, a lot of energy there too, and you went through it, you'd come out on the other side in China. Now, I learned with a little bit of study, like grade school, that the other side of the earth on a globe, it's really easy to learn. Get a globe and look at it as if you were going to put a rod through from where you are to the other side. It won't come out in China. Unless you're in China, it's not going to come out in the United States or anywhere near here. It comes out in an ocean. Most of the earth is covered by ocean. Chances are, if you really found something on this side of the earth. But China Syndrome means that the fear that a nuclear power plant reactor core could go critical, in other words, get extremely hot and the cooling system stops working. That's, by the way, anything that can go wrong. In some kind of fantasy theory, you could talk about how it could blow up, but actually, no, it's the wrong kind of nuclear. Nuclear is contained in the rods, the way they use it to build a nuclear power plant, could go wrong. And it could be a horrible mess, but it's not going to blow up. It just doesn't ignite the way that a nuclear bomb could. The idea is when it goes super critical, gets too hot, that it would melt through the floor, melt down through the crust of the earth, all the way through the earth and come out the other side. There are things that would be a lot hotter between wherever you're standing at the nuclear reactor and the other side of the earth. And it would probably come out in water anyway. So, total fantasy idea that anything like this could ever happen. It might get down to something underneath the building where it went, in theory. The way things are built, that doesn't happen. And in a minute, we'll talk about why it will never happen. But that was the idea. So this movie comes out, and there's a nuclear reactor called 3 Mile Island, which incidentally I had never heard of until the accident happened. It was in Pennsylvania. There was this accident. It scared us like crazy. I was in California. So, of course, we talked about how horrible it could be, and it could be a real life China syndrome and things like that. What really happened was some safety protocols were incomplete or not followed. A guy was on vacation and his replacement didn't do it right. And then the backup procedure didn't work. And then what happened was something got too hot. They had to shut down the reactor. And the reactor that you shut down is not like you flip a switch. The reactor you shut down takes some time. By the way, let me put the big caveat on all of this, that don't quote me and say a trusted source said nuclear is okay. Go and look it up anywhere else. Just search on YouTube and you'll find dozens of things to tell you how nuclear power is safe, including a guy who founded Greenpeace and fought against environmental things and marched against nuclear, said we got it totally wrong. It is a disaster of PR proportions and nothing to do with the actual incident. The actual incident, though, scary. They didn't know what to do. In the end, a decision was made that the steam was building up in a container where the radioactive steam goes. Radioactive steam is water with some radioactive material in it. If you were able to leave it there long enough, it would cool down, turn into water, and they have ways of taking care of that. But because it was building up pressure, like a boiler, theoretically, the thing could blow up. This would be a steam container blowing up. This would not be the nuclear reactor. Could it cause more damage with the reactor? Yeah, people talked about it. Anything could happen. We don't know. We never faced this situation, because what we're supposed to do when it gets to be too much pressure on the gauge, we're supposed to have a containment area where we release the pressure, and then when it goes back down, we turn back on a valve. That didn't work. They decided that what they needed to do was release some of the steam. And you've seen a nuclear reactor, they all have the plume that comes up, and you see this big round thing that the cylinder gets wider at the top, and the reverse cone. And so it goes up there and into the sky. The amount they released made it so that it was like maybe getting an X-ray to people that were very close. And of course, those homes had been evacuated. There was talk about weather patterns. Will the weather make this go somewhere else? What if it hits New York City? Nothing like that happened. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it didn't happen. There was some talk of children exposed to some of the radiation maybe had a higher risk of cancer. That's always something we got to worry about, because we do things with radiation where we don't know the effects for decades. Nuclear testing here in Nevada, there was a lot of people that would just go out to watch the bombs go off. And when the atom bomb does cause a real big show, there were higher incidents of cancer. These are not things to not be a concern about. My question is whether you and I should be concerned about it. There are scientists and engineers very much worried about that, because the return on having a safe nuclear plant is so immense to get power cheap for the company, and it goes out through utilities, and the average utility company that is supplying that energy bases the cost of the electricity you buy based on their cost and a profit margin. They're highly regulated. It's not like they save money by going into nuclear and then suddenly gouge you on the prices. There are plenty of other ways where that system screws up and maybe makes prices too high. That might be politics or a different show. That's not me. But in the technology, makes for cheaper energy. There is something that's cheaper. That's solar when done right. But the reason I'm talking about nuclear, just in a little aside on because if you're sitting there thinking, oh, Warren, he doesn't realize alternative energy is the future. It's going to be solar and wind. Yes, I love solar and wind and geothermal. When you look at how much of the world has got their supply from that, it's too small. It's under 10%. And we're talking about 1% and 2% for solar and wind. Solar is a fantastic success story. In the last 20 years, solar has become really good. About 2010, it turned and it started following a Moore's Law curve where every couple of years the price would go in half. They made better ways to install it, installed a lot more, and government programs to install even more. People put solar panels on their roof that pay for themselves. What happened is that if the program was good, it got in, after a few years, they not only were saving money every month, they were fully paying for the power bill and generating enough excess energy, because sometimes it's sunny outside and you're not home. That energy to be sold back to the grid and it set up right, it's just a wonderful thing. I'm very much pro solar. However, I need to talk about what's going to happen in emerging technology that are going to affect you and me. There are solar plants dedicated to supplying energy to big data centers. We have one of the world's largest data centers, not quite a mile from my house. There are massive buildings, bigger than football field side warehouse building. And every one of them is filled with cheap power going to racks of electronics and supplying better data and than everything. It's amazing. It's like I took a tour when it was new and there was one building, there's now 12. But when there was one building, we went in there and if you watch an animated movie, it was being worked on there. They would work on it in Los Angeles, Hollywood. They would then shoot the files up to the data center, which would crank through it at night and then ship it back in the morning so the artist could work on the next part of it. That was working well enough back then with higher data transfer costs because the electricity costs were so expensive in the building where they were housed in Los Angeles. It was hard to get more power in where they needed it. Here in Nevada, we have all sorts of power. So let's get back to nuclear, because we don't have a nuclear power plant here. Why is Warren talking about nuclear? Because once you get it set up, it's just almost free. And we need that. So Microsoft buys 3 Mile Island. And it's been in the news a bit here lately. And other things like are going to happen because AI is going to need triple the electricity now. Another assumption, and even from some of the very smartest people in AI, is that somehow we're going to need more and more data. And I read yesterday, data will run out in 2028. We're not making enough data. And they've got synthetic data. Are you like me? You hear the term synthetic data and you wonder why can't we have real data? What's synthetic? Does that mean it's fake? It's false? Nah, not exactly. That's a topic for another show and probably a different moderator, because I don't care about that. We produce double data every year, and we've been doing that now for like 30 years. I've been following it. I remember hearing where in the 90s, where we produced in a year more data than had ever been produced before. And the next year hearing, we're producing more data this year than all the years combined. That's what happens when you start growing exponentially. This was before we started having all these sensors all over the place, smartphones that we all carry with us and collect so much data, the GPS data that is going into logged in databases in all sorts of places. The idea of synthetic data is a little bit different in that they are now making data that is not scraping what's already on the internet. And to me, that's a good thing. We're fine, but I don't think that in order for the AIs to get better, that it just takes data. It's like saying we've run out of characters. We need to add a few more to the alphabet. And we have to stick more words in the dictionary. The tens of thousands of words in the dictionary aren't enough yet. I think there's other ways to grow. I don't know the answer. As far as I know, you're going to find somebody say, that Warren's an idiot. He doesn't understand synthetic data. So full disclaimer on anything I said about synthetic data, but we're going to figure out those things. One thing we know we're going to need is more processing power. They now have, my new phone has a chip. It's not been turned on yet, A18 chip in the latest iPhones, and it will house the AI that it will work as the voice AI. Not going to say it because I don't want to talk to my phone right now, but it's spelled SIRI. If I said that word, my phone would answer me. It would not come back in a voice and tell me something. It may display a short answer or look at your phone screen for the URL or pop up the weather, something like that. It can tell jokes, but I don't use these things much. I have them all. I have the one from Amazon. I have this one. I have Google's. I don't use them because I don't like having to configure whatever I'm talking about to what little knowledge they do have. Here's what I found about talking to an AI earlier this week. You can turn on a power mode now in perplexity.ai, and it may not be available where you are watching this, but find something that is using AI, start using it. Google searches have AI enhancements now. It's not that hard to find. Twitter X has X.ai or Grok inside Twitter, and you can get it to create a photo. You can get it to tell you about something. I like perplexity.ai best right now. My best one for having a conversation would be Claude.ai, but perplexity.ai acts like a search engine. And in fact, today I was working on search engine ranking, and I asked it a question about what ranked highest for something, and it wasn't able to tell me because it doesn't search the web and find those answers. It does use the web to find things and then it talks about them, but it doesn't know what the top Google search results are because it's not using Google. There's a few things where I still go back and use Google, but for the most part, when I now have all my default search engines on all my devices changed to perplexity.ai, and you can ask it about something and it will go into a thinking mode that may take a few seconds, may take 10 seconds. And you can see it's doing some searching and thinking. This is based on the technology from OpenAI. Again, I won't go into model numbers or anything because I make these explanations to last. So they're going to be good. If you're watching this in 2026, this is still true. My current one is Perplexity. Watch future episodes and see what I changed to. But all of them have the same idea that it's still a search engine. Remember when you started using search engines? And at first, it was just like define this word, and you'd want to write out a question. But then I got to where I only put a keyword in because I knew it was all keyword, all that search stuff. And then I got to where real sloppy about it. Partial word, watch for the thing to drop down and tell me what I was trying to type, those kind of things. Now I find myself writing out full questions to Perplexity because the chatbots have gone from just giving you a basic boring answer to really talking about something like it understands the subject. You wait a few seconds, it understands the subject. By the way, you can turn that off and you get instant answers. And then you can ask follow-up questions. That's how I learned about what it's doing for using Google. It will not access Google, but I had to ask a couple of questions to get to that point because it just kept giving me the top ranking Instagram because it did have that information. Before we get to this new stuff, whatever AI will do next, you're able to use AI to find out about something and really understand it. So now I'm finding like habits, other habits have developed that we're watching a movie and I say to my wife, who is that person? Didn't we see them in something else? Oh, I don't remember. And so we'll pull up IMDb and look it up while we're watching the movie. And I'm in a conversation with a friend. And he whips out his phone and checks on a fact I told him, who won the World Series, anything like that. The facts are just there at your fingertip. The difference with AI is it can go deeper and find out about sources you didn't even think to look at. And I'm learning all sorts of new interesting facts. This is a phenomenon just a few days old as I tape this. So as I record this. There's no tape involved. Tape, that's a past technology I'll have to leave for my past technologies podcast later. Back to energy. Nuclear is one of the solutions. What the cool thing is, when I started looking at the bad things, what people are saying bad about nuclear, solar, wind, you stick up a wind farm, birds are going to fly into the propellers, and it's going to be a problem. So I looked up, and here in the desert, we have, instead of solar panels that convert to electricity, we have solar panels that are mirrors that shine light to a tower. So imagine a large circle and mirrors all around, row after row of them, pointed so that, and have motors on them so they automatically adjust to point at one point at the top of a tower. And that tower will heat salt. Yes, I do mean sodium chloride salt until it is molten. It is very, very hot. And that then goes underground, stores, and runs boilers that produce electricity. It's much cleaner than burning something, because the salt gets cold and it is reused. And they use salt because it has a very high melting point. There's a good part of the power to homes in Las Vegas comes from a plant like that. There's another one, if you ever drive between Las Vegas and California, there's one near the border that supplies California. Just a fascinating thing to watch them build and how they do it. The one in California has multiple towers with multiple sets of mirrors doing that. They go down to make it profitable for what it costs to build that monstrosity. It would take years of payback, and it also would take using it at full capacity. And they're not able to use it at full capacity for various problems. One of the problems was people complaining about it killing birds. Because if a bird flies between the mirror and the tower, they're going to get zapped. That's how much heat is concentrated in that ray coming in. And then if they zap and fall, I don't think it actually fries the bird. That's a bad thing. I went and did some research. If this wasn't AI, but it's what I would use Perplexity for today, I said, how many birds are killed for generating energy? It turns out that coal mining kills birds from the dust or something like that, or whatever the output of that. I think of the waste product, and the birds eat it and don't do well. Wind and solar kill birds. There's a chart, and you start at the bottom, and it's got little tiny bars. As you go longer, the bars get longer and longer and longer until you get to the top, and it's the leading cause of bird death: cats. Felines. The cats kill more birds than all the other energy sources combined times 10. It's a dangerous life to be a bird. Anything we do, birds will fly into jet engines. We don't like that. We do everything we can to avoid it. Positive. I have been on an airplane. I don't want to be there when a bird goes through the thing. They test it. The testing on these engines, it's a fascinating thing to read about. It takes a whole lot of chickens, dead chickens, that they scoop up and put into the jet engine to test it. People have been through all of these things that we may be worried about and come up with the best answers they can. Is it the best answers for tomorrow? Will we come up with something better? Of course it'll be better tomorrow. Why would it stay the same? We have progress. Things will get better. Some of these things that are problems will go away. But it's really hard for me to get excited about a problem being that birds get killed as human beings do their best to protect the birds and build their progress for everybody. It really comes down to, we've got some goals that I think are ultra important for the rest of the time I'm going to be on this planet. And that is to see that people get water to drink, something to eat, and a place to sleep, and then have the freedom to leave that place and go someplace else if they want to, temporarily, permanently. That's about it. We need to get that to everybody. We're a long ways from being there. But hear this is the most important thing I'm going to say today. We are doing a lot better than we were 10 years ago, and that was a lot better than 10 years before that, and that was a lot better than 10 years before that. I've lived a long time. I've been watching these things. What happens is progress keeps happening. It's not the rich get richer and the poor get poor. No, The poor are getting better. In the United States, to let somebody exist without air conditioning is considered horrible. Death to people. They don't have their air conditioning and color TV and a smartphone. And I agree. I'm 100% agree with that. But there's most of the world that in terms of population still don't have that. My understanding, according to the latest reports I read, is most of the world could get this podcast. I want it to be 100%, of course, but most of the world can get access to a phone and connect it to the internet or a laptop that's maybe shared. They may not have electricity in their home, but they have a battery powered device, and it may not be hooked up to the internet, but they have a place they can go to hook it up to the internet. It's amazing what's happening in some of these places. The rate of poverty has not gone up. The number of people in poverty, the quintupling of population since I was born. When I was born, we were a little over 2 billion souls on the planet. Today, 8 billion. That's quadruple. That's a lot more people. So the number of people that are still in poverty, where they have children because some of the children die, they have a lot of children, and not like the Western world and China, Korea, Japan's had this problem for a long time, where we have less children because we know the children we have are going to survive. If we get down to the people who are really suffering, they need water, they need food, they need a safe place to live, and they need the communication and ability to travel that modern life gives them. And there will be migrations, there will be changes, that'll cause political changes, nations to go up and down. We're going to have progress, and we're all going to be a lot better off. The percentage of people in extreme poverty today is half what it was 20 years ago. And that's going to continue to improve. Now, making $1 a day and then moving to $10 a day is a big change in that person's life. That isn't a big change as far as us poverty fighters look at it. We're not done with that. The one thing we found that allows all this to happen is capitalism. And to make capitalism work, we need energy. And these technologies are going great. Boy, I've been going on, talked about a few subjects. I wanted to tell you about thorium. There's another element besides, we're coming down to the ending stretch. There's another element beyond uranium. And uranium has to be enriched, and then only someone can use, and it's a fairly scarce thing to start out with. And then you got to enrich it and handle it right and do the whole thing. Thorium is abundant like silicon. Not quite. It's not. Please don't say Warren says there's an equal amount of thorium on there, but there's a lot more compared to a uranium. And it's fairly stable. It has a high number like uranium on the element chart. Don't ask me about the science, and talk to you about the concept. And back when all these nuclear reactors started getting built, again, where we're missing at least half of the ones that should have been built by now, probably 3 or 4. So what, 75% of the nuclear reactors we would have if it wasn't for the 3 Mile Island effect. The China syndrome is people get scared and we start building nuclear reactors. That's the real China syndrome that happened because of all of that mess. If we had all those reactors, it would still be nuclear. And so there's a couple of things, one being thorium. That one shows the most promise. Thorium is an element that you can't make blow up like a bomb. And so you can enrich it, do whatever you have to do with it, put it in nuclear reactors, and it works fine. By the way, another thing on safety I forgot to mention, nuclear submarines. They've been running for 60 years. You never heard of a nuclear submarine blowing up. There are nuclear reactors all over Earth. They're not blowing up. Don't worry about it. There's a new design for nuclear reactors, and thorium uses this. Why they voted for uranium instead of thorium, I guess it had to do with politics at the time, or some idea that leading nations had the bomb and were going to dominate, that would keep them on top. I don't know. Those are all theories about what happened, but some decisions were made that basically they got rid of thorium. They built a thorium nuclear reactor. It worked, but that wasn't the way society went. Thorium is safer, good thing we can use. Other thing is the design. Instead of having something where there is the water and the rods are put down into that so they'll stay cool and then made to go critical or not critical based on that. water can overheat, blow up, there can be a problem. Instead of having anything that can overheat, they build a design that flipped that upside down so that the rods come up from the ground, from the sub basement up into the nuclear reactor. They do their thing. If ever there is a temperature gauge that says it's gotten too hot, it shuts down and the rods go back into a safe place where they extra cooling systems are installed and things like that. The reactor can't go critical, no nuclear meltdown. And in addition to that, they have something that I learned about fixing an old car when I was a kid. I don't know how they do it today. A radiator. If the water inside your car got too hot in the engine and the radiator couldn't cool it down, there's something called a freeze plug, and that would blow at a certain temperature that was hotter than an engine should be. It would protect the engine because it would have shut down everything immediately. I replaced one once 50 years ago, and now you know more than I do about freeze plugs because most of that I made up or read about. You can go to perplexity.ai and know more than me about freeze plugs. But that's what happens. It's actually a salt. If it gets too hot and melts, then it shuts down everything by itself. This kind of reactor design would stop any kind of the problems that happen in Japan where there weren't radiation deaths. If there were, it was very slight. The population had a lot of trouble because there was a tsunami. So it's a whole lot of damage, a whole lot of people died, but it wasn't from the nuclear reactor. It ruined the nuclear reactor. In Chernobyl, from what we know now about how the Soviets took care of that, Chernobyl is in Ukraine. And the way they took care of that was Soviet style. Covered up, said everything was okay, reported that to the boss. If you reported something bad, you got shot. I'm oversimplifying. Please don't quote me on that. What happened was it wasn't as well taken care of and it was covered up. They ended up ruining a lot more of the reactor than they needed to, having to send people in to stop, to turn some valves, do something after it was too late, and just basically ordering men to walk in to their death. And so there were people that died from the disaster. But the weird thing is they cleared out an area surrounding it. And 30 years later, closer to 40 now, that area around Chernobyl has plant life and animal life coming back in some places. There are some people that refuse to leave that were in the zone, but they continue to live. Cancer risk, all the bad things about radiation still exist, but you start counting them up and counting up the number of people, zero, from 3 Mile Island, and it gets to be very few. Remember the chart with the bird deaths? You do another one for humans. Coal mining kills more people than any of this. Working on a windmill high up above the ground and falling from there, even if they're located in the ocean, that fall will kill you. There's all sorts of things where there's equipment, it gets dropped, things can go wrong. Building a nuclear power plant, people can die. There's all sorts of danger in how these things get done. I'm not here to discount that danger or say I don't care about those people, but there is always danger. And there's another important thing. Told you a couple of important things today, but let me leave you with this one. Everything in life is a trade-off. So right now, the trade-off, let's talk about the big one, emerging technologies. You study this stuff, you learn about it, you see how you can apply it, or you decide you're going to do what you can to fight it, to live without it, to say, I don't need that. We're not going to have jetpacks in my lifetime. That one could be true. That's a whole nother episode. But you get to make a choice. If we decide that we're going to feed the homeless, that money comes from someplace. It's not that the people who saying let's not institute this program don't want to starve people. It's that somebody has to think it through and say, once we do this, if my child comes to me and asks for some money because he wants to go buy an ice cream cone from a truck that has a siren song calling out the kids to go beg their parents for money and buy ice cream, I probably am going to say yeah. But I am thinking through like, wait a minute, mom's making dinner and it'll be ready in 30 minutes. Maybe it's not good for you to go out and buy ice cream and eat it. Or maybe I'll go with you, we'll get ice cream, we'll stick it in the freezer. You're going to have to wait until you've had your dinner. You can think about it more than just the immediate. Is this a good thing? And we ought to do something about it, or the government ought to do something about it. Here's something you can do: study, learn, figure out how to implement in your business, your life, your career, the things that come out of emerging technology, and you'll be doing better tomorrow. And that's it.